Greetings and welcome to the Amendment 3 Forum hosted by the Metter Center for Politics and Citizenship here at Drury University. I'm Dan Ponder. I am the L.A. Metter Professor of Political Science here at Drury and the Director of the Metter Center. And we are pleased and proud to be hosting this forum. This forum is a collaborative group of community organizations that are committed to educating voters and promoting civic responsibility, especially though not exclusively voting. This effort has brought together a coalition of community organizations to host a series of forums. And you can see these community partners here on the screen now. And we've done this going back through the summer. There was a series of primary forums, and we were also able to do a forum on Medicaid expansion. And there have been a series of forums on state legislative races this fall. And and of course, we're doing this policy forum, and there will be one more legislative forum that I'll talk about later. So I want to just run through this real quick to express my gratitude and let everybody know this has been a collaborative project between Be Civil, Be Heard program, our own L.A. Metter Center for Politics and Citizenship here at Drury, the Junior League of Springfield, Leadership Springfield, the League of Women Voters of Southwest Missouri, Missouri State University's Public Affairs Office, NAACP Springfield, Ozarks Technical Community College Political Science Department, Ozarks Public Broadcasting and KSMU Radio, and Springfield Greene County Library District. I'm sure everybody has this on their calendar, but just in case, remember Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd, which is 3 weeks from yesterday. So we will go through this forum, and we invite you to submit a question to ask the candidates. Just use the form on the webpage that's in front of you to submit questions. Enter your name and question, then hit submit. And your question will be sent to our on-camera moderators. And then we will select which one. I want to also introduce people who are helping throughout this evening. Mike Brothers, who will be handling a lot of the questions that come in, and then I'll actually turn it over to him toward the end of the forum, and he'll be asking the question. And I also want to thank Adam Ellis, who's audiovisual tech in tech services here at Drury. The participants for tonight's Amendment 3 forum in favor of Amendment 3 is Senator Dan Hegeman, and that's his email there. Senator Hegeman is the legislative sponsor of Amendment 3. And in opposition will be Sean Nicholson, who's the campaign director for No on 3. I do want to take a little bit to go over the ballot title. So everybody has an idea of exactly what we're talking about tonight. So this is what will show up, and I got this language basically from Ballotopedia. Shall the Missouri Constitution be amended to ban gifts from paid lobbyists to legislators and their employees, reduce legislative campaign contribution limits, change the redistricting process voters approved in 2018 by 1, transferring responsibility for drawing state legislative districts from the nonpartisan state demographer to governor-appointed bipartisan commissions, and modifying and reordering the redistricting criteria. State governmental entities expect no cost or savings. Individual local governmental entities expect significant decreased revenues of a total unknown amount. This is the ballot language. So to be clear, a yes vote will amend the Missouri Constitution to reduce the limits on campaign contributions that candidates for state senator can accept from individuals or entities by $100 per election. There is no change for candidates for state representative. The amendment prohibits state legislators and their employees from accepting a gift of any value, which is currently limited to $5, from paid lobbyists or the lobbyist client. So it reduces that from $5 to 0. The amendment modifies the criteria for redrawing legislative districts and changes the process for redrawing state legislative district boundaries during redistricting by giving redistricting responsibility to a bipartisan commission, renames them, and increases membership to 20 by adding 4 commissioners appointed by the governor from nominations by the 2 major political parties' state committees. A no vote will not amend the Missouri Constitution regarding campaign contributions, lobbyist gifts, and the process for criteria for redistricting, essentially keeping in place what voters voted on 2 years ago. If passed, this measure will have no impact on taxes. Before we get into it, I just want to, all of our forums have gone through this process for in-person absentee voting. You can still go to the Greene County Clerk's office at 1126 North Boonville. And we posted a how-to for absentee voting, which we got from KSMU. You can find it at their website, or we've placed it at the Metter Center Facebook page. To vote in person on election day, remember the polls are open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you can call the Greene County Clerk's office at this number or get a hold of them online there. There's still time to request an absentee mail-in ballot. You can go to the clerk's office or send a written request to the Greene County Clerk, 940 Boonville, room 113, Springfield 65802. The absentee request deadline is October 21st at 5:00 p.m. So that is a week from today. For those of you who are seeing this online, it may be less than that. We are recording this on October 14th. And once voters get a ballot, it has to be notarized. Notarization of ballot, all absentee mail-in ballots must be notarized unless you meet an at-risk requirement. For example, if you are confined due to illness or disability, or are caring for someone, or you are 65 years or older, live in a long-term care facility, or have a chronic disease. Ballots must be received by the Greene County Clerk's office by 7 p.m. on November 3rd. So don't wait to mail in your ballot. Basically, it has to be there by the time the polls close in person. Okay, so let me stop share. All right, so I want to go ahead and get started with the forum. Basically, this forum revolves around the general question: why are Missouri voters being asked to vote on the Clean Missouri reforms again so soon after it was passed in 2018? Each one of our participants will have 2 minutes, regardless of the question, and they can use it in any way they want. I will pop up on the screen with 30 seconds, with a 30-second warning, but they can't go over, but they can use less than that if they choose. We randomly drew the order to start the opening statements, and our opening statement will be by Mr. Nicholson, 2 minutes.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Ponder. It's exciting to have an opportunity to geek out on redistricting policy here for a little while. The Clean Missouri Amendment, as you mentioned, passed in 2018 with a big bipartisan majority. It passed after a 2-year effort of signature gathering with citizens across the state. And it passed after a 2-year campaign where we talked piece by piece, line by line about the policy that we were putting forward. And in the end, the redistricting policy, the fair map rules that were approved by voters were approved by an almost 2-to-1 margin after being endorsed and supported by every anti-gerrymandering organization that there is. They passed with support from everyone from former United States Senator Jack Danforth to the AARP to the League of Women Voters. It was a great big coalition. Soon after that passed, some politicians and lobbyists in Jeff City started to get to work on a way to undo what voters had passed. And what they've put forward in the form of Amendment 3 is far more than a repeal of what voters approved in 2018. It would put new rules into our Constitution that are unlike anything Missouri has ever seen. And frankly, they're unlike anything else in the United States. And because of those extreme details, because of the big voter mandate that we had in 2018, there's actually a bigger coalition this year than there was 2 years ago coming together to say no on Amendment 3. The folks behind Amendment 3 know you aren't going to like what's in the fine print. And so they are hoping to distract voters with that $5 change to lobbyist gift limits, with that $100 contribution limit change. No one thinks those are real reforms. Those are a smokescreen to distract voters from what's really going on, which is a redistricting system where lobbyists or political operatives can draw districts to protect their favorite politicians. The ultimate goal of Amendment 3 is super safe districts where politicians don't have to worry about their voters back home.
Senator Hageman, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ponder. Pleasure to be with you. You know, my name's Dan Hageman. I'm a term limited senator from Northwest Missouri. I'm a farmer up there as well. I have the largest senatorial district in the state, therefore the most rural senatorial district in the state. I respect our communities of interest, both urban and rural districts in Missouri, and I believe that they should have a robust voice in Jefferson City. Thus, my motivation to give the voters another opportunity to look at the way we draw the General Assembly districts in the state. It is my great concern that our communities will find their voices diminished in Jefferson City because of the liberal think tank ideas contained in the criteria of Amendment 1 passed in 2018, which places partisan preference above our communities. I could not stand by and allow something like that I believe deeply in my heart will negatively impact our state without trying to let the citizens of the state of Missouri have another opportunity to keep the ethics and actually enhance ethics reform, and to largely go back to the process of bipartisan commission, which has served the state of Missouri well over decades, giving us both Democrat and Republican controlled legislatures.
Thank you. All right, for the first question, this will be for Mr. Nicholson. 2 years ago, Missourians voted nearly 2-1 to pass what was then called Clean Missouri, or Amendment 1 at that time. What are the goals of that amendment now that it is part of the state constitution?
Yeah, so the ultimate goal of the voter-approved reforms is to have a General Assembly that is more responsive to the people back home, that is not just responsive to a small class of insiders, of lobbyists, of big donors. And so all of the pieces of Amendment 1 back in 2018 were about that same goal of reducing the influence of partisan interests, of special interests. And the reason that the Clean Missouri Amendment got so much bipartisan support is because on the redistricting portion of that measure, it added independence to the process, to a process that had previously been defined by backroom deals, by secrecy, and by pretty much a lack of criteria that protect voters. And so what voters put into the Constitution was some independence, some checks and balances to the process, added transparency. So for the first time next year in 2021, when maps are drawn, there's going to be a shared data set that everyone is going to be able to see to know that they got a fair shake. And there are now criteria in the Constitution that allow all of us to see how the maps are drawn and then be able to go challenge maps if we think they're unfair. I think it's notable in a time when there's so much divisiveness and partisan bickering that this is actually a spot where Republicans and Democrats can come together for a good process. Fairness, competition, transparency, those are not partisan values. And that's why the Clean Missouri Amendment passed with such overwhelming margins.
Thank you. Senator Hegeman, you were the chief sponsor of the legislation that became the proposed Amendment 3. Would you elaborate on what the goals of Amendment 3 are?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ponder. As I said in my opening statement, I really want the people to have the opportunity to look at the way we draw our districts in the state of Missouri. I really resent the fact that a lot of interest came in from outside the state of Missouri and supported an effort that changes the way we draw our districts in Missouri in a method designed to split up our communities. And I can't see anything but doing that don't honor county lines, that don't honor city lines in the name of partisan fairness and trying to get at reducing wasted votes. And so that's the reason why I wanted to give the people the opportunity to look at it once again, continue the ethics reform that they got in 2018, and also look at the process that has served the state of Missouri well.
Thank you. You both are being fantastic with your time. I appreciate that. Okay, question 3 is back to you, Senator Hegeman. A major point of disagreement between proponents of Amendment 3 and its opponents concerns the question of who is counted. Across the United States, most redistricting plans at the state and local levels consider total population. If Amendment 3 passes, it would apparently count registered voters rather than the total population. Excluded from this would be children and non-citizens. Why is this a part of the plan?
Yeah, and I think that analysis or your preference of the question is incorrect. It does include the concept of one person, one vote, which refers to a requirement that coordinated districts should have roughly equal population, a principle that already appears in the Missouri Constitution. And that is per the Court of Appeals decision. It is built on a U.S. Supreme Court decision that already clearly states that one person, one vote is the law of the land. It does not say that we won't count children in the process. And where we're at, really, it references that Supreme Court ruling, like I say, which is the law of the land. And that ruling was in the Evanweld versus Abbott decision. And that's where we're at. We want to make sure that people are counted. That's the new law of the land per the Supreme Court, per the Court of Appeals in their opinion, where they quoted the Evanweld versus Abbott decision.
Thank you. Mr. Nicholson, same question to you, sir.
Yeah, so the sponsor of Amendment 3 has been very clear about the goal of what they're trying to do. The Attorney General's office was also asked about the same question when we were before the Western District Court of Appeals. They are trying to draw maps based on the number of eligible voters in the state, not the total population. I will refer to some Senate discussion from January where Senator Shoup asked, what does one person, one vote mean? How are we coming up with a population? Are you tying it 2 votes? Senator Hageman said, we're looking at the people that vote. The people that are able to vote are the people that are counted, not registered voters, but the opportunity to do that. And then before the Western District, one of the justices asked the Attorney General's office, the Solicitor General, what's this all about? Same question, what's the goal here? And the Attorney General's office said, one person, one vote. The criteria is based on the number of actual eligible voters in the district, not the absolute population. So they've been clear about their goals. And this is a big, huge, profound change. One of the ways that you'll know it's a big change is when you look at your ballot summary. It says that individual local governments expect significant revenue losses if this passes. And that's because if our communities aren't fully counted, we don't get our fair share of the representation, we don't get our fair share of the resources. It also happens to be discriminatory. If you don't count everyone, it disproportionately impacts communities of color across the state. It would have a huge impact on suburban communities. It would have a big impact on Southwest Missouri in terms of its representation. And this is actually, frankly, one of the big reasons why we've got a coalition in 2020 that is way bigger than what we had in 2018 because of this rather radical change to who counts.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Nicholson. Both sides of Amendment 3 claim that their side will combat gerrymandering, the process of drawing districts in such a way to either explicitly favor or disfavor some voters at the expense of others. So my question, proponents of Amendment 3 argue that it is more important that communities are represented than it is to have citizens accurately represented in the Missouri General Assembly. Proponents tend to argue that communities would largely be kept intact, and even so, they are represented adequately by city councils, community commissions, and so forth. What's your take on this?
Yeah, so compact contiguous districts are the rule of the land now. Like that is the law, that's what's in our state constitution. The question is, do we also have compact districts? Do we also have districts that keep communities together with an overall outcome that is fair? That's what voters approved. That's what the law of the land is right now. There was a great analysis done by some academics at the Princeton Gerrymandering Project that looks at redistricting plans across the country. They've worked really hard to fight against gerrymandering in state legislative and congressional plans across the country. And they looked at the voter approved rules before they were passed. And I'm quoting here from Professor Sam Wong at Princeton of the Missouri rules. And he says, the math in the text leads to the following. About 1/5 of the seats overall would be competitive. The other states would be safer, either Republican or Democratic. This can all be done without crazy shapes, and it makes government more responsive without necessarily distorting the geography or partisan tendencies. It's easy to see why Amendment 1 got bipartisan support. So I guess that's a long way of saying it's a false choice. We will continue to have districts that keep communities together. That's important. The question is, do we have that and a fair outcome for everyone?
Thank you. Senator Hageman, it was a long question. I can give it to you again. It's basically the same question and give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I think Mr. Nicholson and I will disagree on this. I see the priorities of the amendment that passed in 2018 that will absolutely give us and almost guarantee that we will have long spindly districts that don't recognize county borders, that don't recognize city borders, because it places those as a last priority as we go about the redistricting process. And that is my greatest concern. I think I value that our communities in urban Missouri as well as rural Missouri have a unique and distinct voice, and those voices should be honored in Jefferson City. This is the way we've done it for decades, for generations. That has served us well. And again, you've given us both Republican and Democrat legislatures. I truly fear that this will diminish the votes. You will cross city lines, you'll cross county lines. It'll be a spoke in the wheel type of measure to try to get enough Republicans in one area and enough Democrats in the other area to make a competitive district. And that is my greatest concern, that it will diminish our community's impact in Jefferson City.
Thank you. Our next question, actually, both of you pretty much answered that in your responses, so I'm going to skip ahead. This one will be for Senator Hegeman. Fair Missouri, a group that was formed to support Amendment 3, argues that the bipartisan commission will work, among other things, to keep cities from being split up among districts, protecting minorities from underrepresentation. So this is a sort of the same type of question, only looking at underrepresentation. Those in opposition argue that its passage would limit minority representation. What is your reaction to these opposing?
I absolutely disagree with that, and thank you, Dan. I think that what we're trying to do, keep the voice of those communities intact. I will tell you, one of my colleagues, former colleagues in the Senate that now is in the House, stood up on the floor, a Democrat, and also supported Amendment 3 because she represents her community, which is a minority community in the St. Louis area. Former Senator Maria Chappelle Nadell. And she understands that this may diminish the voice of her community, just as I worry about the voice of rural Missouri being impacted by this. Because of the criteria that puts partisan fairness, competitiveness, and wasted votes ahead of our community's interests and our community's voice. Again, I think that we have got the order wrong. That's why we're giving the people an opportunity to keep their communities intact and keep their community voices intact in this process by making it a higher priority in the process.
Mr. Nicholson, same question.
Yeah, so if you go to our website at cleanmissouri.org or no13missouri.org, you will see there a list of everyone who opposes this radical gerrymandering plan that's on the ballot. You will see that every civil rights organization in Missouri, every national civil rights organization that has looked at the text of what the politicians in Jefferson City are trying to do opposes it. And that opposition comes from two big things. One, Amendment 3 objectively weakens the protections in our state constitution now for voters of communities of color. It weakens what voters have approved. And as we talked about just a few minutes ago, the attempt to not count everyone is discriminatory in its impact and would have a huge impact on who counts and who matters in our legislature. There's another part that we haven't gotten to yet, but Amendment 3 also seeks to make it so that a judge couldn't even throw out an entire redistricting plan, even if the judge has found that that's unconstitutional. So it's a grab bag of bad ideas in Amendment 3, and that's why there is so much pushback and there has been so much work to defeat Amendment 3 because it's unfair to voters and because it's discriminatory in what it would do.
Thank you. All right, the next question is basically on the same topic. The question is on the same topic, but worded slightly differently. So actually, Senator Hegeman, I'll start with you. Why are Republicans in the legislature asking voters to weigh in a second time on the issue of redistricting just 2 years after Clean Missouri passed, nearly 2-1? In other words, why so quickly?
Yeah, and Dan and Dr. Ponder, I think I've answered that already. We will answer it again. I truly think that this will be a process, or what was adopted in 2018 will harm my community's voice in Jefferson City. I think because it does not keep the priorities of keeping counties intact, keeping cities intact, keeping natural boundaries intact that we've accustomed to. The districts will look very different under the amendment in 2018 than what we're proposing in Amendment 3, which is going back to the process that we've used in the past that, again, has given us both Republican and Democrat legislatures. I truly think, I am a person that puts our communities above politics and really want to see our voice continue to be shared in Jefferson City. And this is my greatest concern. And that's why I think we need to give the people an opportunity to have the ethics reform that they had before, but look at the process of the way we draw the state's districts, again, keeping our communities top and foremost in importance.
Thank you. Mr. Nicholson, it's basically a similar question. With Amendment 3, voters are being asked to vote on the 2018 redistricting reforms before they have been put into practice. Supporters of Amendment 3 said that this would head off unknown problems and issues in addition to the things that the senator has pointed out. What's your response to this?
Yeah, so I mean, there was Republican opposition to Amendment 3 coming out of the Senate. There was Republican opposition to this coming out of the House. The House Rules Committee chairman, a Republican, told everyone, hey, I've been told by the state GOP that there's errors in this, there are corrections that need to get made. Those corrections weren't made and it got pushed through. It got pushed through in the middle of a pandemic. And the reason is that we're about to start the redistricting process. And the redistricting process in Missouri happens every 10 years once the census is complete. The trigger for how the rules work, both before and after voters approved reforms, is the completion of the census, the delivery of the population numbers to the president. So that's going to happen soon. So Amendment 3 loses in November. The census count gets wrapped up December, January, and then the wheels start turning with the process next year. So the reason that this got rushed through, the reason that they are trying to smash this through is because we're about to draw new maps, and because voters said, hey, we've got a fair process that'll lead to a fair outcome. Voters approved that, and some folks are terrified of a fair situation.
All right. This next question, I'm going to start with Mr. Nicholson. It's going to be the same question for both of you. It's a little bit long. Over the summer, the Cole County Circuit Court issued a ruling that required the summary language of the amendment to be rewritten because it failed to acknowledge what the court felt was the central issue, which is the effort to return redistricting to the pre-2018 status, including the bipartisan commission, which had been replaced by voters in 2018. Campaign limits are also part of Amendment 3. On August 31st, a panel for the Missouri Court of Appeals agreed with the Cole County Circuit Court judge that, quote, certain aspects of the official summary statement are unfair or insufficient and require revision, but, unquote, but the panel said its draft of the ballot title had, quote, more limited revisions than those ordered by the circuit court, unquote. Could you reflect on why you believe the court objected to the summary language? And after you're done, Senator Hegeman, same question to you.
Yeah, so the folks who put Amendment 3 together went too far. They tried to lie to voters. They know that the fine print of the redistricting plan is not going to stand up under scrutiny. So that's why they added a $5 lobbyist gift change, a $100 contribution limit change. No one thinks those are real reforms. Those are intended to distract folks from what's really going on. As this entire conversation has revealed, this is about the gerrymandering policy. And now 2 courts have ruled, both at Cole County and at the Western District, that the politicians behind Amendment 3 broke the law with their lies that they wanted to appear on the ballot. And so it got rewritten twice. What voters see when they go into vote will be what came out of the Western District. But I think it says something that in 2020, that if you break the law with dishonesty, that is, you got to go pretty far in 2020 for that to happen. And so what we have found across the state is that voters are not fooled by what the trickery behind Amendment 3. They see through the smokescreen for what it is, and they'll reject it.
Thank you. Senator Hegeman, same question.
Yeah, so there was a fairly radical ruling from the court of the court in Cole County that the appellate court had a chance to look at, revisit, relook at, and came back with a different opinion on how it should be redrawn. I resent the fact that Mr. Nicholson says it lies. It's not. We truly reflected what was happening in the resolution that became Amendment 3. It does enhance, it does lower the limits. Actually, it bans gifts, lobbyist gifts. It does ban gifts and completely ban gifts to legislators and their staff. And it continues to drive money out of politics. And so I think the appellate court saw that reasoning and decided to make some changes to what the circuit court did.
Okay, thank you. Senator Hegeman, supporters of Amendment 3 argue to ensure that the process is not controlled by one political party or politician, the amendment will create a bipartisan commission to lead redistricting, which supporters argue will significantly decrease the chance of corruption. Opponents argue that this amounts to putting politics back into the process rather than using a more non-political plan that relies on a nonpartisan demographer. Could you elaborate your position on this?
With the amendment passed in 2018, it put in place a nonpartisan demographer that just happened to be selected by the one, partisan Democrat statewide office holder, the state auditor's office. It puts in charge in a great capacity an unelected bureaucrat that really would redraw how we do the state of Missouri with fairly limited abilities to select that individual. I truly think that a bipartisan process with both Republicans and Democrats looking at it, a larger committee with larger voices instead of just one individual empowered to draw the state of Missouri is the proper path to go. And I truly think that that's where we need to go. I think it's a much fairer process where you have many voices looking at how the state's drawn with a lot of various interests, in maybe what their communities desire and reflect. And so I think the bipartisan path is a much better path to go.
Mr. Nicholson, your response.
Yeah, so the process that voters approved is a multi-step process with a demographer and the commissions, and the demographer role is selected in a multi-step process that is largely driven by the state Senate, not by the state auditor. As Senator Hegeman's colleague, Caleb Rowden, said just last week, the Republican majority leader, we actually picked the demographer, myself and the minority leader. It was a multi-step process on purpose to make sure that that the outcome is fair and it is good for the people of Missouri. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about what voters passed and what the law is now is the demographer goes first, creates draft plans, and then those drafts go to the commissions that have existed, that were not modified by the Clean Missouri Amendment and will continue to exist. What Amendment 3 does is it actually goes farther than we've ever had in the past in terms of having a super partisan, hyper-partisan process. It takes the map drawing back to the back rooms, so that is for sure one of the goals, but it also gives the state political parties new powers that they've never had before for picking which lobbyists and operatives go into those back rooms. And so that is one of the reasons why the Amendment 3 proposal is so bad, that it makes the process more secretive and more partisan, but it's one of many of why it will be rejected in November.
Okay, thank you. I do want to make an announcement to those to our audience members. Our participants have been unbelievably good about staying within the 2 minutes, so we're actually running out of prepared questions. I do have several, it looks like several that are coming from the audience. So again, I want to remind you to please use that form in front of you and submit, and we will get to as many as we can. We have a little under 30 minutes left. So a couple of questions, different ones for each. So I want to start with you, Mr. Nicholson. One issue that is brought up frequently is the role of money in both campaigns for and against Amendment 3. Opponents of Amendment 3 in particular have raised a lot of money, some of which is coming in from outside the state. What's your reaction to this? Why is this an important issue?
Yeah, so campaigns are expensive, and we've worked hard for the last few years to build a big coalition, a big bipartisan commission to move the state forward to have nonpartisan and fair redistricting. It is certainly the case that we have built support from Republicans, Democrats, from philanthropists outside the state, from organizations and leaders inside the state as well. And so we're super proud of the huge coalition that we've built that includes everyone from the AARP to Senator Jack Danforth, to the League of Women Voters, to the NAACP, to reform organizations, civil rights organizations across the state and across the country as well.
Senator, would you like to respond? And I do have another question for you, either one.
No, I'll talk about that one. You know, the supporters of Amendment 3, we are very limited in our fundraising ability. We don't have a lot of money to put forth to push this forward. Farm Bureau is leading the effort on pushing forth Amendment 3 because they understand that it will diminish the voice of rural Missouri, and therefore they've stepped up and with some of the other agriculture related groups are pushing it forward. You know, but unlike those against Amendment 3, that largely the money comes from out of state interest, from folks in Texas and Oklahoma, from NARAL, from Pro-Choice, Sierra Club, Planned Parenthood, the NEA, some dark money groups out of Washington, D.C., that are back and pushing this effort to stop Amendment 3 in the state of Missouri. We don't have big coffers. Mr. Nicholson does and is able to work through those measures in his effort to defeat Amendment 3.
All right, thank you. I do have one question that came in before we get to the other audience questions, and I'll let both of you have a shot at it if you'd like. Why does Amendment 3 reduce gift limits from, for example, $5 to $0? And why does it only reduce contributions to Senate campaigns from $2,500 to $2,400? In other words, a total of $105. Is that a substantive difference that requires a constitutional amendment? And Senator Hegeman, I will let you have that one first.
You bet. Yeah, it's just continuing the ethics reform effort that was started in actually 2016. There was an effort to try to take money out of politics. We continue in that. We're doing another $100. Basically, it takes away the inflation factor on the Senate side. And then also, people thought they were voting for a complete gift ban in 2018. We are giving them a total gift ban to the legislators in 2020.
Mr. Nicholson.
Yeah, so that's the trick, right? Like that question reveals just how silly this smokescreen really is. No one thinks that a $5 gift change is actual reform. No one thinks that a $100 gift change is actual reform. Those are in this proposal to distract voters and trick them into supporting the gerrymandering plan. If the Senate and the House were so intent on changing gift limits by $5, they could do that today. They could have done that last year with the law. They could have just changed the rules. If it was the most important thing for the Senate and the House to change contribution limits for state Senate candidates only by $100, they could have done that a long time ago. But that's not what this is about. Everything about this conversation has made clear that this is really about the redistricting proposal, and they know that the fine print can't stand up to any sort of scrutiny. And so that's why they're in there. They're in there to trick voters.
Okay, well, at this point, I want to once again remind our audience members to submit questions, and I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Mike Brothers, who's been fielding the questions that we've been getting from the audience members. And so, Mike, it's up to you.
All right, thanks a lot. And I even remembered to unmute myself after listening to the great conversation that I've had a chance to have a front row seat to. So thanks to both of you gentlemen. Just have a few questions. So I just want to remind folks again about that form in front of them if you want to submit. I'm going to paraphrase this one just a little bit, and I want to make sure that the person asking it, at least the way I understand it, knows who will be picking the demographer under the current rules. But this person, Scott, asked if Amendment 3 passes but Nicole Galloway defeats Mike Parson, it will be a Democrat who will lead redistricting. And this is actually a question for the senator. Are you in favor of allowing redrawing the district seemingly in a way that might favor Republican, or that might weaken Republican incumbents in favor of Democratic challengers? So I'll turn that over to you.
I am in favor of a process that will value our communities above partisan politics, that will keep our communities together. Again, I state my motivation once again. It's to keep our counties intact, our cities intact, so that they have a unified voice in Jefferson City, and know their legislators when they go to Jefferson City. instead of long spindly districts that don't reflect our communities much at all at the effort of trying to get to an idea called partisan fairness. My deepest concern is the loss of voice of our communities, both urban and rural.
Thanks. This is a question, Senator, that may come more to you as well, since it's about elected officials, but this is a question from Lisa. And she says, currently we have incumbent representatives refusing to attend candidate forums because, in her words, they don't have to, quote unquote, because their districts are not competitive due to gerrymandering, and they don't have to answer to voters of their constituents. So she asked, if Amendment 3 passes, how do we make representatives in safe districts show up for the people they represent?
My colleagues are all of various and sundry sorts. You know, many of us approach it from the standpoint of public service and would attend many forums like that to be holding. Hey, I'm term limited. I'm even attending, forums and participating in the process so people understand what's going on. That would probably be more of a personal question between your citizens and their elected representatives. This is not something that will be accomplished, with either plan. You're talking about individuals, whether some legislators take their job seriously or not. I think that's left to the voters to decide whether that's the kind of representation they want.
We had one that I believe you all touched on earlier, but I'll go ahead and ask it again. We do have time here, and it's about how those under 18 would be counted and represented in those districts.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that, Mike. So the goal of Amendment 3 is to not have kids count. So my son is upstairs running around right now, getting ready for school tomorrow. He's 11. He would not count if Amendment 3 is passed and fully implemented, as the sponsor indicates is the goal. But he would vote for a senator and a representative in those maps because he's going to come of age during that time. There is a reason no state in America does this. Every state in America counts everyone. Missouri has counted everyone in its maps since at least the state constitution of 1875. This would be a radical, profound change in how maps are drawn and how representation works, because our families, our communities, our neighborhoods would not be fully represented like they are now. And it would disproportionately impact not only communities of color that I mentioned before, because they happen to be relatively younger, but it would also impact communities that have lots of families that are growing and have lots of kids. So I grew up in a town of around 3,500 folks, but it was a place where it was a thriving community with strong schools. It would disproportionately lose power because there's a lot of kids in Palmyra. It's just, there is no coherent argument for why kids should not count in our maps. They are part of our families. Our communities need to be represented. And it's not just the right thing to do, it costs us if we don't count everyone. So don't sleep on the part of the fiscal note that says that governments are going to lose revenues if this happens because they're not going to be fully counted and fully represented.
Senator?
Yeah, and I fundamentally disagree with Mr. Nicholson on this. It does not say that kids won't be counted. Let's face it, we will use the census numbers that are provided to the state of Missouri to draw the maps in the state of Missouri. I think it is a false point. It's a misrepresentation of what the amendment says to say that kids won't be counted. There's nothing in Amendment 3 that says kids will not be counted.
All right, thank you both. Next question is about gerrymandering. And Alan asks, how does each side define the term gerrymandering? And then how does your position reflect the difference between your side's definition and the opposition's?
Yeah, so gerrymandering doesn't have multiple definitions, but it gets thrown about as a way to distract from what's really going on. There are a couple of different kinds of gerrymandering. There's partisan gerrymandering, there's racial gerrymandering. It's all wrong. And what I would point out is that the groups that work on anti-gerrymandering reforms, that work on fair representation, nonpartisan redistricting, both in Missouri and around the country, are unanimous that Amendment 3 would put Missouri on the path to become the most rigged system, the most rigged maps in the United States. What Amendment 3 is trying to do is unlike anything Missouri has ever seen. It's unlike anything else in the United States. It even gives explicit allowances for radical extreme partisan gerrymandering that is beyond anything else that exists in the United States right now. So I think there are groups that fight gerrymandering in Missouri across the country. Every single one of them says that Amendment 3 is an extreme radical plan that ought to be defeated.
And again, I absolutely disagree with Mr. Nicholson on this. My vision of gerrymander is long, spindly districts that have little relation to our communities, that has little reflection of our communities out there. The amendment that passed in 2018 is unlike any other process in America. This plan in 2018 puts Missouri way out on a limb with this experimental plan. And that's why I'm offering the opportunity to go back to a tried and true process that we've had and used in the state of Missouri for decades that honors our county boundaries, that honors our communities, and tries to keep them compact and contiguous as possible as a higher priority than an effort to achieve partisan fairness and partisan goals.
All right, thank you both. The next one is a very simple question that the two of you will probably have a different interpretation on and sort of how this works. But the question is, who picks the nonpartisan demographer and how that process works? And I assume they're talking about under Clean Missouri, the previous proposal. So Senator, do you want to talk about your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty straightforward that the auditor gets a list of applicants that she vets, she sends on to the the Senate majority and Senate minority leaders, floor leaders, and they have the opportunity to reflect on, look at those applicants. They have the opportunity to throw a third of them out, and therefore leave a third. And if they can't select one, then the auditor will select one, I think in a randomized fashion, to move forward. So it just bases upon the folks that the auditor deems fit to be able to move on, that she sends on to the two floor leaders to consider.
Yeah, the senator's right. Yeah, that's how it's done. It's intentionally a multi-step process that involves leaders of both parties to ensure that the most qualified applicant is selected. There are 6 applications sitting in the state Senate right now. As I mentioned earlier, Senate Majority Leader Rowden is already working with the Minority Leader Rizzo to figure out the best selection for that. So the senator's totally right. It's a multi-step process that involves multiple parties, and the ultimate choice is not made by the auditor. The auditor collects the applications, gives them to the Senate, and then conducts a lottery if needed.
All right, thank you both. And this is a question, I get it pulled up here. This is a question actually directly for you, Senator. If Amendment 3 does not pass, will you try to write another proposal?
No, I think the people will have spoken at that point. I've got 2 more years to be in the Senate. We'll have to abide by the will of the people. The people have another chance. The only way we can change the Constitution is by putting it out to a vote of the people again, and giving them the opportunity to have the ethics reform, as well as look at the process we use for reorganizing the state of Missouri, redistricting the state of Missouri. And if the people now have, with this choice, have decided it, then we will need to move forward in that process, at least for the extent of my term in the Senate. And now, would I be supportive of a change in the future? Probably put forth by some other individual, some other senator or group, maybe a fairer Missouri or whatever comes down the road in the next decade. Who knows? If I'm still around, I likely might like that.
Okay. Wonderful. There's another question that's come in, kind of similar to the topic that we have covered, but we do have a little time, and so I'll go ahead and ask it. And the question is from David, and it's how non-eligible voters will be taken into consideration. So, Senator, you want to take that one again and kind of explain that?
Don't quite know what he means by non-eligible voter.
My assumption there is he's referring to people under 18.
We've talked about kids already, and we disagree on what the amendment says on the counting of kids. Again, we'll use what the census data is provided to us as a way of drawing the districts.
Yeah, if I may, Mike. So Amendment 3 in the section we're talking about that changes who counts. It makes 3 big changes. One, it eliminates the requirement that we have right now in 3 separate places that say you got to count everyone. That's the rule now. It's the rule in every state. It's been the rule and it's been the standard in Missouri for 150 years. So it removes the requirement to count everyone. It adds this new language that says maps will be drawn based on 1 person, 1 vote. And then it removes the requirement that maps be drawn based on decennial census data. So it's not even accurate to say, that we're going to be drawing maps based on the census data that's happening right now. They are removing that requirement from the Constitution. And I will just go, like the senator is backtracking on his previous position. He was asked explicitly what this language meant in January, and I will just read it. Senator Shoup said, "My question to you is, when we're talking about populations, what does 1 person, 1 vote mean? How are we coming up with a population? Are you tying it to who votes?" Senator Hageman said, "We're looking at the people that vote. The people that are able to vote are the people that are counted, not registered voters, but the opportunity to do that." That was echoed by the Attorney General's office, by the Solicitor General. A justice asked the attorneys for Senator Hageman, for the other legislative defendants in the ballot summary title case, asked explicitly, what does this mean? The Attorney General's office was explicit, almost the exact same thing that what the senator said back in January. 1 person, 1 vote. The criteria is based on the number of actual eligible voters in a relevant district. And then later on, the Attorney General's office said, if the voter is interested in that particular issue, we are putting them on notice that we are changing things from how they were before. So there is no confusion. There's some attempted confusion at this point, but the sponsor, the Attorney General's office, were explicit about what they're trying to do. They are trying to not count kids in our maps.
Okay, we've had a couple other questions come in, and I think this is a good one. In 2020, so Jane asked, in 2020, we've watched as literally every aspect of our lives has become politicized. Party lines and ideologies are affecting literally everything. I'm struggling to believe that there's any person in the country who would act in a, quote, nonpartisan way on any issue, on this or any other issue. What would you say to convince me otherwise?
Yeah, so I'll go first. I think I'd say 2 things. So one of the more gratifying and life-giving things about this work that I've been working on now for 3 or 4 years is that this is an issue where folks come together across party lines to have redistricting process, to have maps that are fair and put voters first. It cuts across the partisan nonsense when there's been a lot of things happening outside of my house that I can't control. This has been really great. More specifically to how we all know that we're going to get a fair shake is that the voter approved reforms were not just changing the process by how the maps get drawn to add independence to them. We added transparency to the process. So when the demographer presents the draft plans to the commissions that continue to exist, have always existed, that demographer is required to make all of the data that's used for those draft plans, it becomes public. And so we will have, for the first time in Missouri, a shared data set that we can all use to say, hey, here's a different way that the commissions could make changes. Hey, I think this is a better way. Hey, I want to go sue because I think these maps are junk. Everyone will have the same data set or the same baseline data that they can use. And then the third thing that voters approved, and the big reason why the Clean Missouri Amendment got so much bipartisan support, is that there are now, for the first time, clear criteria that protect communities. First and foremost, protect the voting power of communities of color, then ensure that the overall map plan is fair. It encourages competition. Communities, districts are still required to be compact, contiguous. So all of these criteria are in the Constitution now to govern how the maps are drawn. And then they give everyone the knowledge and the certainty on the back end that if one of the rules wasn't followed, that you can go to court and say, hey, there's a fair way to do this. There's a better way to draw a map.
Senator, same question to you.
I guess I've been at this game long enough that I share some of that concern and about the nonpartisan demographer. You know, I wonder if there truly is somebody, an individual with the power that will be invested with such power and as to redraw our whole state of Missouri and how we were represented. I put more faith in a bipartisan commission where groups of admittedly, you know, partisan individuals come together and find a path forward by a supermajority. You know, instead of the bipartisan commission turning down a drawn map by a 7/10 majority. You know, what we're looking at will continue the opportunity of and this is the criteria that Amendment 3, you know, goes in. It guarantees equal population. It's the criteria. Equal population is the #1 criteria. Compliance with the federal law, including the Voting Rights Act, is the second criteria. Continuous and compact boundaries, the third criteria. Fourth, preserving communities with priority to keeping whole counties intact. And fifth, the partisan fairness and competitive aspect. Really, that's much of what we're really discussing here. What is the order of priorities that we look at the state of Missouri? We retain the top priorities that was included in 2018. We changed the priorities on some of the things for the reasons that I've already outlined, because I value communities over partisan goals.
All right, gentlemen, we have just one more question here in the hopper. Senator, we'll start with you on this one. I think Sean started last time. The question is, this is from Tammy. She says, aren't many districts already extremely gerrymandered? My urban district is long and skinny with several areas that jut out to make it more conservative. This includes several sections of elementary schools that represent many different communities defined by those schools. So if not Clean Missouri to dissuade gerrymandering, then what?
Yeah, and I disagree, you know, with that. I think that the proposal adopted in 2018 will make those districts even much more spindly, much more windy, which I perceive when you look at the ruling of Jerry that came up with the term gerrymandering. It was a long snake-like type of district that had little reflection of community boundaries. I think there's importance to that, to honor those boundaries, the natural boundaries of rivers, county lines, communities. And I think that's a better way of not gerrymandering the state than the process adopted in 2018. That's why I want to give people a chance to look at it once again.
Yeah, so I would say for the last couple of decades, our legislative elections have been defined by a complete lack of competition. With our current plans right now, they are fundamentally incumbent protection districts, and Amendment 3 seeks to take that and make that the case for as long as possible. To one of the questions we had before, when politicians don't have to worry about the voters back home, when they know that they can't be held accountable because they've got a super safe district where they get to have their full terms and they don't have to worry about their voters, that impacts their behavior. Every single anti-gerrymandering organization in Missouri, around the country, that has expertise in what is good policy that puts voters first, every one of them supported the voter-approved reforms. That is why the voter-approved reforms passed by almost a 2-to-1 margin. That's why they passed in Springfield with huge bipartisan majorities. And every single one of those anti-gerrymandering organizations condemns Amendment 3, says that it puts Missouri on a path to be one of the most skewed plans in the United States. So there are organizations, there are leaders, there are civil rights activists who have expertise in this matter. They've looked at the policy. Amendment 3 is junk, and that's why they're all encouraging voters to vote no.
Okay, well, I want to thank both of our participants, and I think we're going to start with closing statements. You can take up to 2 minutes, and this time we will start with Senator Hageman.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ponder, and those involved in putting on this forum. Ultimately, the voters will decide on November 3rd how they want redistricting ethics in the state of Missouri to proceed. I believe that Amendment 3 is a way to cherish and respect our communities in our state. This election will chart the course on how our communities will be represented for decades to come. And that's why I'm supporting and would encourage people to support Amendment 3.
The ultimate goal of Amendment 3 is to let lobbyists, political operatives draw maps and back rooms to protect incumbent politicians. They know voters won't like that. They know voters will not like the extreme details in the fine print. And so they've got a trick, or they're hoping to trick voters. They are hoping that a $5 lobbyist gift change and a $100 contribution limit change is enough to trick voters into passing a redistricting incumbent protection scheme. We have seen, though, that voters are smarter than that, and that there was a huge bipartisan vote for fair maps and fair redistricting in 2018, and there's going to be another one of those in 2020. The coalition that is coming together to defeat Amendment 3 is bigger, is more diverse than the coalition that passed the Clean Missouri Amendment in 2018, because there's already been a very clear voter mandate for fair redistricting, and because of the extreme details in Amendment 3 that would change who counts, that would weaken protections for communities of color, that would allow extreme partisan gerrymandering, and would actually break up communities with some of the new formula that's added to the fine print. So I am very excited that we are just about to Election Day, that we're just about to have another bipartisan mandate for fair maps, and would encourage everyone to learn more at no13missouri.org and then vote no on Amendment 3 on November 3rd.
Thank you to you both. I think it's fair to say that a hallmark, the lifeblood of democracy, a necessary but not sufficient condition for democracy is vigorous debate and the exchange of ideas. And I think we've certainly had that here tonight. So I want to thank both of our participants. I want to share my screen real quick, because I want our people out there to know where this will be posted and what is coming up. So hold on just a second. And from current slide. All right, so this forum was recorded and it'll be posted on these websites as well as others, but at least ksmu.org, thelibrary.org, our own drury.edu/Metter Center, and the League of Women Voters of Southwest Missouri website. We do have one more final forum for State Representative District 130, which will be a week from tonight when we're recording this. It'll be on October 21st at 5:30. Republican candidate Bishop Davidson and Democratic candidate David Gregg, and it'll be hosted by Ozarks Technical Community College's Political Science Department and the nonpartisan student organization Politically Active. And you can go to their website there to find the link. So once again, I would just like to thank our participants. I want to thank all of the people that wrote in and asked some very thought-provoking questions. And I would like to thank once again Mike Brothers and Adam in Drury Tech Services. Thank you, Senator Hegeman, and thank you, Mr. Nicholson. And thanks to everybody. Don't forget to tune in a week from tonight for our final forum. Good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Let's wait till they